All right, welcome back to Feather and Bone TV. In this show, I'm going to talk about the hunt for this deer, a buck I call Predictable 10. And like the name suggests, he was very predictable. I knew where he bedded. I knew the routes he took to go back and forth from the feeding to the bedding. And so he was very predictable. But the reason why I didn't shoot him earlier in the season was because there was a giant, two giants, matter of fact, one giant non-typical and a giant typical, both on the same property. So I'll come back to that in a second. But when I first moved to Kentucky in 2016, I was knocking on doors trying to get permission, and the gentleman that came to the door said, absolutely, you can hunt for coyotes. We've had problems. The neighbors have had problems with them, so they've been harassing some of the mayors in the spring, and then the one neighbor to the west lost a pet. So, well, whatever. So I said, yeah, I'm here to the rescue, whatever. So I go out there, and the first time out on the property, I called in 3 coyotes, I shot 2, and I missed 1. And then I put the rifle away and started looking for deer sign. And the trails, and they were like interstate highways, there were rubs all over the place on some pretty significant sized trees. And about 30 minutes into it, I picked up his right side. And he has a real nice long G3. And he was only 3.5, I think, at the time. And he had broken brow time. And about a week and a half later, after I found the shed, I went back there and I did a little scouting, brought my camcorder, and I filmed him out in the field with about 5 other bucks, and he was about 250, maybe 300 yards away, upwind of me, feeding in a cut alfalfa field. So, and he was awesome, and I could tell he had the potential to blow up into something really nice. So, before I get into the recovery of this buck, I'm going to play some clips from some other deer that I had close encounters with throughout the season. Really nice deer, not quite big enough to shoot, but really cool. Then I also have a doe harvest on here, okay? So I'll show that. And last but not least, I'm going to show 2 clips of the buck that I call Muley. And he looked like a giant mule deer in the like mid to maybe even high 180s, okay, typical. And I took him off the hit list because he broke his left G2. And on the weekend of my birthday, he was chasing a doe, and I already tagged out on this deer. So I decided to take him off the hit list because he had a tine that was broken. I thought, well, that's the risk you take, and yes, he has the potential to grow up into a mega giant, but the neighbor ended up killing him, I believe, opening weekend of gun season. So even with 2 tines, one tine was like probably 13, maybe 14 inches long, and that was busted off. And then he had another tine that was 9 inches plus, and he still scored in the low 160s as a typical. So that's the risk you take, but I'm really happy with this deer. So I'm going to play that series of video clips right now. I didn't want to get out here too early because it was
77 degrees out with real light and variable winds. So I didn't want my scent to be pooling by my tree for very long. I came out here and I brought the decoys, you see, and I was just getting set up, getting strapped in the tree, when I heard something coming down the creek. It was a coyote. I didn't even have my release on yet. Well, after I got down from the stand, on my way back to the truck, about 100 yards from the truck at the bottom of the hill, I almost made it without bumping into any other deer, and lo and behold, there was Muley, and he was 60 yards away from me. The lighting was really poor. Legal shooting light ended 15 minutes earlier, and all I could do was sit there and watch him. Pulled my camcorder out of my pack and filmed for about a minute. And here's a short little clip showing this buck of a lifetime. Unfortunately, I couldn't do much about it. Well, that's buck number 4 for the night. Deer down for the year. She ran maybe 10 yards, 8 yards. The deer were moving on Sunday. When I shot that doe, they were moving by about 4:45. But it's a little bit warmer today, and it's sunny. It's not as overcast. It's a little bit warmer. It's supposed to get down to the 50s, high 40s tonight. So I'm hoping that with this wind, I'm downwind of these scrapes. There's a scrape right underneath my stand about 6 yards. I have this primary scrape at 17 yards, and both the big 10-pointer I call the Predictable 10, and then Muley like to come through this little corridor. There's an island of trees to my left, about 15 yards to my left, and straight in front of me to the west-southwest is that primary scrape, and in between that island of trees and this woods over my right shoulder, they like to come right through this little strip, this little funnel. So far they've been coming through pretty much after dark. The Predictable 10 likes to bed on that ridge on the other side of the creek, but he always comes through here almost every night. And he's been coming through lately between 7:30 and 8 o'clock at night, which is right, I mean, it's getting close. So they're starting to roam a little bit more. I'm hoping with this cool front that has come through Saturday night and into Sunday, that they'll be on their feet a little bit early. My God, it's him. That's him. That's him. That's the big one. That's Muley. amazing encounter.
Him. He came from the southwest. The winds are the east-southeast. So he came out into this open field, about 200 yards away. And he's kind of cutting across the open field with the wind in his face. God, he's awesome. It's 6:45. If I would have my decoy out here, it would come probably right in. What a magnificent deer. All right, hopefully you enjoyed that. So now I'm going to play the clip of the recovery. So bittersweet, because if you film and hunt long enough, you're going to have an experience where the deer that you're after comes in and you have a decision to make. It's legal shooting light, but legal shooting light is not the same as camera light. So this particular camera that I'm filming this segment with right now, this interview, is different than the camera that I used at the time that I was hunting back in 2017. The CMOS sensor on this one is a 1-inch CMOS sensor, which is phenomenal at low light gathering capabilities. But the camera that I had at the time was not the greatest. So the buck is heading his way back to the bed after feeding in the evening. I catch him. The wind is perfect. I take the shot, but I didn't have good camera light. So I had to wait 3-4 minutes. Sun comes up, and then I did the recovery. Now, when you're filming towards yourself, kind of up angled towards the skyline, it can be pretty dark and you can still see yourself pretty decent. But then you turn the camera around and then down towards the ground, and if you film long enough, you know what I'm talking about, it's twice as dark and you just lose the object. So kind of a bum deal. I mean, you know, that's kind of why you bring a camera and a camera arm and your shotgun mic and you set up and you hope to get capture the hunt on camera. But it doesn't always work out. So I'm going to play the recovery right after the shot, and you'll see that right now. All right. I just shot a Predictable 10. He's a buck in the high 150s, I'm guessing. And he circled all the way to, and he came in and he started hugging the creek. And I'm downwind of him, and I just took my second buck back to back here in Kentucky. Looks like great double lung blood to me. So there's rubs all over in here. I slowly walk into the wind. Wind's out of the west-southwest right now, and that's the direction he traveled to go back to the bed. So he probably ended up dying close to where he found his right side back in February. I'm gonna show these rubs here. There's a rub right there. There's a rub right here. Look at these right here.
found his shed. Right along this embankment, right there. Good blood here. It's right there. Smart. He came from, after the shot, he came down along the edge of this creek, only 50 yards, and bedded on this embankment here. And I literally walk within maybe 5-6 steps of him, and he was right on this ledge here, right up tucked up tight against the edge. And I walk within 5, 6, 7 yards of him, maybe 3 or 4 times. And he jumped down in here, took his last little couple leaps, and died right there in the creek. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna have to cross back because I can't get him from here. All right, to be continued. Predictable 10 came walking through, and the funny thing is that when he was skirting the creek, he was on the far northeast side of the patch of woods, and I walked in the ditch in the creek, and I walked up the embankment and slipped right up into the tree stand, and I was downwind of where he was walking. So he came in basically to circle and get downwind of that patch of woods that runs parallel to the creek, and scent check it. I have a mock scrape that I put out about 10 days prior, and he, along with some other monsters, have been hitting it. The wide buck I call Muley, and then the 17 point I call the Beast. And I saw him in September. I did not have the camera that day because it was raining pretty heavy off and on. So right last light he came out, and the sun came out, and it cleared right up, and I would have had amazing footage, but I didn't have the decoy at the time, so it worked out for the best. But this buck has been really rubbing and scraping along that creek, so kind of neat story. You let them go so they can grow. I'm on the board for 2017. Nice buck.
Alright, so now I'm going to talk about why the hunt was successful. I have some maps here, and if you look at the first one, you see a creek that runs right smack dab through the middle of the property. And then north of the creek is a drainage that comes from the property line to the north and feeds straight down into the creek. Okay? In the second map, you can see I've labeled north on the north part of the property, and then there's a purple dot, and that big purple dot is at the end of the farmer's driveway. The small little dots are the route that I took to access down the hill and into the drainage, and then work my way into the actual strip of cover that runs along the edge of the creek and into my stand. The large green dot, is where he would like to feed in the soybean field to the northwest of the creek. And the small green dots are the route that he would take, and I know this because I had trail cameras dotted all along this edge. And he would come down and he would cross onto the property, staying in cover after leaving the field. And then he'd get down along that strip of cover that runs parallel to the creek, and then he'd work his way from west to east, and then right past my stand. Okay, and the green X is where I ultimately shot him at about 11 yards. Okay, and then after the shot, you can see the other small green dots where he ran down to the creek and then he expired. And the red X is where he expired, in the creek. Okay, I've labeled the orange arrow to show the wind direction. That day was out of the southwest. It was west-southwest. Okay, so I was able to park at the end of the driveway and walk down the hill into the drainage, and then just only take maybe 3-4 steps right to my stand. And what he would like to do is he would like to come in with either a headwind or a slight crosswind, and he would take that route every time when the wind was out of the south or southwest. And I only knew that because over a 6-week period I'd monitor the cameras, and the cameras tell a story. Okay, so he would bed about 125 yards up into 150 yards up into that ridge across the creek to the south. And so by walking in into the drainage, I kept my scent to an absolute minimum, and I was able to walk with the wind in my face. All right, so now this deer comes in, and he thinks he has the wind, and he's downwind of the creek. He's walking along through the woods parallel to the creek, and he thinks that he's fine. He turns to his right. He makes a sharp curve to his right, turns, and then heads back down toward the creek, and there's a creek crossing right there, and that's the route that he was taking, and he has been taken predictably for weeks and weeks and weeks. Now, the reason why I like October, okay, this is worth mentioning. The reason why I like the month of October so much, and I don't really do that well in November, because in November the bucks are distracted. They're not really on that same pattern of that bed to feed, and they're not as predictable. That's all deer, not just this guy, okay? So in October, I like to wait until the deer thinks that he has the wind direction in his favor, but he doesn't. The cooler temperatures, and the night before, the temperatures dropped almost 20 degrees. So I knew that he was going to probably be on his feet feeding a little bit later than normal and be on his way back to the bed a little bit late, and he was. He wasn't quite late enough for me to capture on camera. I have the recovery, but not, so you saw what happened there. But I was right. I came in, he thought he had the wind direction fine. He's following along the woodlot that runs parallel to the creek. He turns and he heads back towards the bed just like he had for weeks and weeks. He thought he was fine. Well, he wasn't quite distracted by does, and the scrapes are popping up all over the place. This is like about the 20th or so of October, and scrapes are popping up everywhere like they typically do, and rubs and so on and so forth. But he's not quite distracted by does yet. The does won't come into heat for another couple weeks at least, right? But the cooler temperatures got him up on his feet, moving earlier in the afternoon and staying on his feet later into the morning. And that's what made that hunt success. He thought he had the wind in his favor, and he didn't. I hugged the edge of the drainage. I only had to walk into the woods just a short amount of distance, maybe 3 or 4 yards to the base of the sycamore tree, climb up into my stand, and 90% of the woods that ran parallel to that creek was upwind of me. So, and he was smart. He would hug the edge of this drainage on his way back towards the creek crossing. But I was downwind of that, right? So my scent was blowing up and back behind me into a field, and he would never come out in that field. And I only knew that because I had trail cameras and I could monitor him. So that was pretty cool. But that's a story of Predictable 10, and I'm very proud of him. He ended up scoring the high 150s. He had a little extra time here at the base of his right side, and there you go. Hopefully the hunt was enjoyable, and the tips I share will help you become more successful this fall. Thanks for joining.